was the youngest monarch ever, and who was the oldest? Which kings had the shortest reigns in history, and who had the longest? Who was the tallest king and the shortest queen? These are just some of the questions this royal history documentary from History Calling will answer as we look at record-breaking royals. These are the kings, queens, princes, princesses and others from around the world who have made it into the history books because, deliberately or not, they did something extraordinary, something that no other royal has managed. Some of these records are tragic, the most royals killed in a revolution, for instance. Others are amusing, including which princess has the most hit records. And many of the subjects of today's video are Guinness World Record holders. So sit back and relax as you hear about royals from as far afield as ancient Egypt and the modern United Kingdom who have beaten all the other royals in one way or another. A little disclaimer before we jump in. I've used Guinness World Records website to check some of these records, and in other cases I've had to do my own research. Given that there have been royal families of some type almost everywhere in the world at some point in history, there's always the chance that some of these records are not correct. We can't know the heights of every royal, for instance, so I have to work with the information which is available to me. This video is just intended as a bit of fun. If you manage to discover that some other royal should be holding one of the records I've listed, please feel free to let me know in the comments, but don't be a jerk about it, as my American friends would say. There are also some cases where we aren't sure who should hold certain records, and I'll explain the reasons for this as we go, and even offer some alternate record holders in those instances. Finally, I've done my best with the pronunciation of names and places which are foreign to me, but again, don't be mean about it if I've got something wrong. I'm having to look at many different languages and cultures for this video. Okay then, let's get started. Record number 1, the longest reigning monarch. This is one of the ones that there's been some dispute over. The official answer is King Louis XIV of France, who became monarch at the age of 4 and reigned for 72 years, 110 days, between 1643 and 1715. For this accomplishment, Guinness, as I'm going to call it for short, state that he enjoyed the, quote, longest uninterrupted reign by a monarch of a sovereign state. It's that phrase, sovereign state, which is important, as well as the fact that Louis's reign can be definitively dated. There are other men who might hold the crown for longest reign, please enjoy that little pun I just made, but whose reign lengths can't be properly verified or who weren't ruling over sovereign states. Minty, king of Arakan, which is now part of Myanmar, supposedly reigned for 95 years between 1279 and 1374, for instance, while Guinness also says that the longest documented reign of any monarch is that of Pheops II, also known as Pepi II or Neferkare, a 6th dynasty pharaoh of ancient Egypt. His reign began in circa 2281 BCE when he was 6 years of age and is believed to have lasted circa 94 years. End quote. By the by, this would also make him the longest reigning pharaoh. Some Egyptologists claim that the records which accord this exceptionally long reign to him are not contemporary though, and are therefore untrustworthy. Whatever the truth, if this question comes up at a pub quiz, I advise answering with Louis XIV. Thankfully, we can be more certain about record number 2, which is the longest reigning Queen Regnant. This accolade goes to Queen Elizabeth II of the United Kingdom, who reigned for 70 years, 214 days between 1952 and 2022. As Queens Regnant are much more unusual than Kings Regnant, there are far fewer people whose details needed to be checked for this one. As a little bonus, I can also tell you that Elizabeth holds the title for the longest reigning monarch of the UK, or of England and Scotland if we look back to the time when they had separate monarchies. For record 3, let's look at the opposite end of the spectrum, at the shortest reign of any monarch. There are actually 2 men who hold this record, but both are disputed. These are Louis XIX of France and Louis II of Portugal, both of whom are said to have reigned for 20 minutes. As they also have the same name, assuming we don't pronounce it as Louis and Louis, I'm going to refer to them as the French Louis and the Portuguese Louis for clarity. The French Louis supposedly became king in 1830 when his father, Charles X, was forced to abdicate. 20 minutes elapsed between Charles signing away his regal rights and Louis doing the same, and this is why he is held, by some, to have been king for that period of time. He was never proclaimed monarch or recognised as such though, including within the abdication document, and this is why there is such disagreement over whether he was a king. The Portuguese Louis was the eldest son and heir of King Carlos I. Born in 1887, on the 1st of February 1908, he and his father were both fatally shot by assassins in Lisbon, but as Louis lived for 20 minutes longer, the argument is that he was technically the king during that time. The difficulty seems to be that he wasn't declared king. However, I'm not aware that such a declaration was needed within the Portuguese monarchy. So for my part, I would be inclined to view the Portuguese Louis's reign as valid, while I would be a lot more on the fence about the French Louis because it's evident that he was never going to be accepted as King of France, while the Portuguese Louis would have been recognised as King of Portugal. If you've seen some of my other videos, you'll know that I don't tend to view someone as the monarch just because they, or a small number of people, call them that. Still, French Louis is listed by Guinness, so let me know your thoughts on this in the comments below. To me, this is definitely one of those grey areas where I would say there is no right or wrong answer, just different opinions. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this content and would like to get more from History Calling, please remember to give this video a thumbs up to let YouTube know you approve, and also subscribe to the channel with the notification bell switched on. This is completely free and means that YouTube will let you know when I upload a video or post to my community tab. You can also find me over on Instagram, the link is below, and on Patreon, where I provide bonus material including early access to ad-free videos and mini podcasts. Again, the link is in the description box. Thank you to everyone who already supports me on that platform, as well as to those of you who make one-off donations to the channel using the thanks button underneath videos. And now, back to our record-breaking royals. Record 4. The youngest ever monarch. Again, we have two people who tie for this title, and both were born kings. John I of France was the posthumous son of Louis X, and was born king on the 15th of November 1316. Tragically though, he lived for only 5 days. Then we have Alfonso XIII of Spain, posthumous son of Alfonso XII, and born king on the 17th of May 1886. He reigned until he was deposed in 1931, but did not die until 1941. Record 5. The oldest person to ascend the throne. In this case, everywhere I looked, the record was given to King Charles III of the United Kingdom, who was 73 years old when he became king in 2022. If you're aware of a less well-known monarch or emperor who you think can beat this though, let me know below. Record 6. The longest serving heir apparent. As the oldest person to ascend to the throne, it may not surprise you to hear that King Charles also holds the title for the longest serving heir apparent, having held that position for the entirety of his mother's 70-year reign. Record 7. The oldest person to become queen consort. Given that her husband was the oldest person to become king, it is likewise unsurprising that this record is held by Queen Camilla of the United Kingdom, who was born on the 17th of July 1947 and was thus 75 at the time her husband acceded to the throne. Record 8. The longest lived royal in history. You might think this record would go to someone like Queen Elizabeth, the Queen Mother, who made it to the grand old age of 101 before her death in 2002, but she's actually several years shy of some lesser known but longer lived royals. The person in the top spot here was Nana Afia Kobe Sirwa Ampem II, Queen Mother of Asantaman, which is in modern day Ghana. Unfortunately, I couldn't find a picture I could use of her, but she was born in 1907 and died in 2016, making her a very tough to beat 109 years old at the time of her passing. Record 9. the tallest monarch. For this, we have to travel back to the Wars of the Roses in England and to King Edward IV. Edward was born in 1442, died in 1483, and was buried in St. George's Chapel at Windsor Castle. His skeletal remains were examined in the late 18th century and showed that he would have stood at about 6 feet 4 inches high. This would be enough to make him a tall man even today, but in the 15th century he must have absolutely towered over virtually everyone he met. Record 10. The shortest adult monarch. Some of you might be able to guess who the shortest adult monarch on record is, as they are famous for their diminutive stature. It is, of course, Queen Victoria of the United Kingdom, who was born in 1819 and died in 1901. She reportedly stood at just 5 feet 1 1/4 inches, though this measurement was made when she was a young woman, and other estimates say that she was as little as 4 feet 10. It's possible she lost a little bit of height as she aged, as many people do, and you can get an idea of how petite she was by looking at this dress she once owned, which I saw on display in Holyrood Palace in Edinburgh. Record 11. The youngest queen or future queen to give birth. Eleanor of Castile was most likely born in late 1240 or 1241 and was married to the future Edward I of England in November 1254. In July 1255, she gave birth to a stillborn or short-lived daughter, who must have arrived prematurely, and when Eleanor was still only around 13 or 14. I couldn't find any queen who gave birth at a younger age than this, though Eleanor wasn't queen yet when this event occurred. However, Lady Margaret Beaufort, who gave birth to the future Henry VII at the age of 13, might well have taken the record if only she'd been a queen too. Still, despite the fact that I'm naming Eleanor here, I think this is one of those records which might have been beaten at some point in history in a country where extremely young marriages were and are allowed, but we just don't have the necessary records to demonstrate it. For record 12, we have the most prolific monogamous royal, and it's the word monogamous here which is key. This is the royal with the most number of children by one partner, so it does not include polygamous unions. The holder of this title is Prince Hartmann of Liechtenstein, who lived between 1612 and 1686, and who had 21 children by Countess Elisabeth Susalm Reiferscheidt. Annoyingly, Guinness doesn't provide more details, nor was I able to find out much about this couple online, so I can't tell you more about them or their offspring, but I assume that Hartmann and Elizabeth were married. Record 13. The longest serving consort of a British monarch. I'm going to limit this record to a consort of a British, including English and Scottish monarch, to be on the safe side, but actually I'm not aware of any consort in the world who has beaten it. The holder is Prince Philip, Duke of Edinburgh, who was consort to Queen Elizabeth II from 1952 until his death in 2021, a whopping 69 years and 62 days, and I'm just including the time that she was queen here. I'm not including their entire marriage, which lasted even longer. He displaced Queen Charlotte, wife of George III, but she still holds record 14 on our list, which is that of longest serving queen consort in British history, having been queen for 57 years and 70 days, in between her marriage on the 8th of September 1761 and her death on the 17th of November 1818. Again, I'm not aware of any queen consort for any country who has beaten this, but just in case, I'm limiting this title to queen of one of the countries in the British Isles. I also have a video all about Charlotte's life, which I'll leave linked on screen and below for you. Record 15. The most royals killed in a revolution. This is one of the most depressing records on the list and is held by the Romanov family of Russia, who lost 15 members to the Russian Revolution in 1918 and 1919. The most famous are, of course, the former Tsar, Nicholas II, and his wife and their children, whose fate I have a video about already. But many other members of their immediate family were slaughtered too, and in circumstances which were just as horrific. This really was one of the darkest chapters in that country's history. Let's go to something a lot lighter for record 16. the royal with the most number of hit records. This title is held by Her Serene Highness Princess Stephanie of Monaco, daughter of Prince Rainier III and Princess Grace Kelly, and the sister of the current Prince Albert. According to Guinness, quote, her album Rendezvous, under the record label Success, made it into the German top 10 and the Dutch top 40, as well as placing high on the Italian and French charts. Well done, Princess Stephanie. Record 17, the largest royal family. This record goes to the royal family of Saudi Arabia, which Guinness states had over 4,000 royal princes and 30,000 royal relatives in 2002, while the Guardian newspaper listed it as having over 15,000 members in 2012. Whatever the true number, the family dwarfs all others. The Saudi culture allows for polygamy, which is why this royal family has been able to swell to such large numbers. Record 18. The royal with the most names. This record is held by Don Alfonso de Bourbon y Bourbon, who was born in 1866 and died in 1934. This Spanish royal had 88 names, and please note this is names, not titles, which is so many that I'm actually not going to read them all out here as it would take too long. I'll put them on screen for you though. The Guinness website explains that this surfeit of names was largely due to the desire by this point in history for Spanish royal children to have as many names of saints as possible. Record 19. The most married queen. Back to Tudor England for this one. As far as I'm aware, the most married queen in history is Catherine Parr, who had 4 husbands. The first was Sir Edward Burgh, to whom she was married between 1529 and 1533. The second was John Neville, 3rd Baron Latimer, who she married in 1534 and remained with until his death in 1543. A few months later, she married Henry VIII, becoming his final queen. Then after his death in January 1547, she once again had only a short break between husbands before wedding Thomas Seymour in around April or May. She died in September 1548 from childbirth complications at the age of 36. I have plenty of videos on Catherine, including one on her early life, which looks at her first 2 often overlooked marriages, so I'll leave those linked below for you. Record 20. The most married king. For this, we have to go biblical, and so we'll need to take the numbers with a pinch of salt, as we obviously don't have marriage records to back this up. King Solomon is reputed to have had over 700 wives, and I haven't come across any record that can break that. If we weren't going to include him though, I think the holder would be another polygamous king from history. For instance, I came across an article from CNN written in 2016 which discussed Abumbi II, the 11th Fawn or king of Bafut, which is a town in Cameroon, who at that point had close to 100 wives. I know Henry VIII is one of the most famous many married kings, and he arguably engaged in polygamy too. See my video on whether he was really married to Anne Boleyn for more on that. But no matter which way you cut it, he was an amateur compared to many others. Record 21. The first royal to be photographed. The earliest photo I could find of any royal was one of Prince Albert, consort of Queen Victoria, which was taken in 1842. It is a daguerreotype, which was one of the earliest types of photograph invented, and is now greatly faded with age. The fact that it exists at all is remarkable though, for 1842 is incredibly early in the history of photography. The oldest surviving picture we still have only dates to 1826 or 1827, and the first image of a human being from 1838, just 4 years before this shot of Albert. The technology really was cutting edge at the time, and his interest in it has secured Albert a record. So those are some of history's record-setting royals. But of course, records are made to be broken, and some of these will no doubt fall in the coming years, decades, and centuries. Remember to let me know in the comments if you think the 2 20-minute kings were actually monarchs, and for more on royal history, try one of these options next. Whatever you select, please enjoy, and until next time, keep learning.